The world exists only through perception. When perception ceases, the world dissolves.
That's a heavy way to start.
Right. I want you to let that sink in for a second. When perception ceases, the world dissolves. That is an aphorism from the Yogacara tradition.
Which is, for context, a highly influential school of ancient Buddhist philosophy.
Yeah.
They focused almost entirely on the nature of consciousness.
Yeah, and specifically how our minds construct the reality we experience. And that single, rather unsettling idea is exactly where we're starting today. Welcome to this deep dive.
It's going to be a big one.
Oh, absolutely. If you're listening to this, you're a learner, you love connecting the dots, and I promise you this session is going to be just a massive aha moment.
Definitely. The source we're looking at today is simply titled, To the Cosmos.
Yeah, but listen, if you are expecting maps of the solar system or, I don't know, gravitational physics, catalogs of galaxies, you are in for a profound shock.
A total bait and switch.
Seriously. I'm looking at the very first page of this text, and it features this incredibly complex hand-drawn illustration. There's this serene-looking angel with massive wings holding a glowing star.
Yeah, and the crescent moon floating in those stylized clouds.
Right, and down below, framing a globe, you have a classic mythical dragon on one side.
And a phoenix rising up on the other.
Exactly. And right across the center of the globe is this band covered in intricate alchemical symbols. It sets a mood that feels... it's ancient, it's mystical, almost magical. You look at it and assume we're about to learn about medieval star charts.
Oh, mythical beasts, yeah.
Yeah.
But the text is intentionally setting a trap for the reader.
It totally is.
It plays on our assumptions of what a cosmos should be, only to just immediately pull the rug out.
Yeah.
Just a few paragraphs in, the author explicitly states, let me find it, yeah. We now step back to observe the structure in which consciousness unfolds.
Boom.
Right. This is not a map of external space, but a diagnostic schematic of the mind's architecture.
It's such a brilliant pivot. Despite the celestial artwork and the angelic figures, we are not looking outward at physical space at all.
No, we're not categorizing planets. We are looking at a blueprint of internal architecture.
A diagnostic schematic of the mind's architecture. That phrasing makes it sound like we're looking at the blueprints for an engine, Or maybe the wiring diagram of a supercomputer.
That's a great way to put it because the text actually treats the mind very much like an engine, and it lays out a really specific, highly practical mission for us as readers.
Okay, let's unpack this. What is the mission?
Well, it states that we are examining this cognitive cosmology not to get lost in what it calls celestial taxonomy.
Which means...
Meaning we aren't supposed to just memorize the names of different magical realms or categorize the dragons.
Right, no Dungeons and Dragons manual here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The goal is to understand the mechanics of the illusion we currently inhabit. The author wants to break down how the mind projects its world piece by piece so that we can ultimately liberate the mind from its compulsive habits.
I'm really trying to wrap my head around the scale of that claim. The text is essentially arguing that the physical universe you and I are sitting in right now, the room you, the listener, are in right now, the commute you might be on, all of it is an illusion generated by compulsive mental habits.
And this document claims to provide the schematic to prove it.
That is wild.
It is. And to build that case, the first section dives straight into the engine room. It starts by completely redefining how we typically experience consciousness.
Because in everyday life, we tend to think of consciousness as a passive, independent observer.
Right.
Yeah.
We feel like there's a little person sitting inside our heads, looking out through our eyes as if they were windows, just watching the world happen.
Yeah, I always think of it like being an audience member in a movie theater. The movie is playing on the screen of reality, and I am just sitting in the dark, eating popcorn, watching it unfold.
That's the default human assumption. But the text argues that in its ordinary, unexamined function, consciousness does not exist as an independent observer at all. It is a mechanical, reflexive process.
Okay.
And the core mechanism driving that process is a habit the author calls objectification.
Objectification. That is a really loaded word. Normally we hear it in a sociological context, like treating a person like an object.
Yeah, but the text is using it in a strictly cognitive sense here. It defines objectification as the habit of dividing indivisible experience into two artificial poles, a perceived object and a perceiving subject.
To understand how radical that is, we really have to look at how the brain processes raw data.
Right, because raw experience is just a chaotic flow of sensory input.
Exactly, but the mind cannot handle that chaos, so it constantly splits the flow. It creates a thing being seen and a me who is seeing it. It divides the universe into subject and object millions of times a second.
It's constant.
Let's test that theory with an analogy, because the idea of dividing indivisible experience is pretty abstract.
Yeah, analogies help here.
Think about putting on a top-of-the-line virtual reality headset. When you first slip it on, you are fully aware that you're sitting in your living room with a piece of plastic strapped to your face.
Sure.
But as the system boots up, it starts feeding visual data to your eyes and audio to your ears. Within minutes, your brain takes those separate, artificial streams of data and stitches them together into a cohesive reality.
And you completely forget the headset is there.
Exactly. If a virtual baseball is thrown at your face in the game, you physically flinch. Your brain has artificially divided the experience into two poles: you, the player, and the virtual baseball, the object.
Even though there is no baseball.
Right. You have completely lost the reality that it is all just light and sound being rendered by the same machine.
The VR analogy is highly relevant because the text considers this cognitive division to be the engine of saṃsāra.
Saṃsāra, that's the ancient Sanskrit term, right?
Yes, referring to the endless cycle of wandering, of mundane existence, and, crucially, of suffering. The text emphasizes that that feeling of the me wearing the VR headset is not a static, permanent noun.
It's not a noun, so it's a verb.
Exactly. It is a rapid, repetitive process of identification.
So the self isn't a solid entity residing in my skull. It's an action my brain is constantly performing.
Yes.
The source describes the mind as almost like a frantic tailor, weaving reality together.
That imagery.
It says the mind takes strands of sensory data, like a patch of color, a sudden noise, a rough texture, and weaves them together with mental data, like memory and conceptual labels, to patch together cohesive units.
So you don't just experience a collection of brown pixels and a hard sensation against your back.
No, my mind instantly weaves that raw data together, pulls the concept of a chair from my memory, and suddenly I experience sitting in a chair.
And the critical phase happens immediately after that unit is constructed.
What do you mean?
Once the chair, or the person talking to you, or the entire room is rendered by the mind identifies with a viewpoint relative to it.
Ah, I am sitting on the chair.
Right. I am annoyed by this person. This split-second moment of identification, where the mind takes its own internal projection and treats it as an external, independent reality, is what the text calls the birth of the mundane world.
Wow.
It describes this entire process as an act of cognitive constriction.
Cognitive constriction, that makes sense. We take the boundless, infinite possibilities of raw experience and squeeze them down into a tiny, stressful box of me versus everything else.
That's exactly it.
And to hammer this point home, the author brings in a quote from the Matsya Upanishad.
The Upanishads are ancient Indian philosophical texts. They form the theoretical basis for much of Hindu philosophy, dealing heavily with the nature of reality.
The quote reads, "Just as a man in a dream is not aware that he is dreaming, so does the fool, deluded by ignorance, see only the perceived world."
The dream analogy is arguably the most accurate way to understand this diagnostic schematic.
How so?
Well, when you are asleep and dreaming, a terrifying monster chasing you feels entirely real. The ground under your feet feels solid. You feel actual panic.
Yeah, your heart is racing.
Right. Your mind has generated an entire environment, but because your consciousness is entirely identified with the dream self running away, you buy into the absolute reality of the dream world.
You don't question it at all?
Not until you wake up. It is only upon waking that you realize both the monster and the victim were constructed from the exact same mind stuff.
Which forces a massive paradigm shift for how we read the rest of this document.
It really does.
Because if we are going to explore this cosmos, we have to accept the text's premise that worlds are not physical locations in a universe.
No spaceships required.
Exactly. You don't travel to them. Worlds are simply stabilized modes of perception.
And moving forward, the text introduces the four planes of consciousness based on that idea.
Right. But we should probably give the warning the text gives here.
Oh, absolutely. We must not view this cosmology as a hierarchy of moral rewards.
Yeah, this is not a system where you behave well and are granted entry to a fluffy heaven, or behave poorly and are sent to a fiery underworld.
The text explicitly defines these planes as a stratification of cognitive density.
So we are moving from the general concept of the illusion into the specific gears of the engine.
Down to the nuts and bolts.
The baseline level, the densest stratum of this architecture, is called the sensory realm, or Kāmā-Loka.
The text notes that this is the baseline of human and animal experience. This is the realm where you, me, and everyone listening spends the vast majority of our waking lives.
So what defines the sensory realm?
It is characterized by a constant, highly volatile interaction with data. It's an environment constructed entirely out of the friction between our senses and the objects they encounter.
And in this specific framework, there are 6 senses, right?
Yes. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought itself is categorized as the 6th sense, perceiving mental objects.
That makes sense.
The mind operating in this plane is incredibly restless. Returning to your Taylor analogy, the mind in Kāmā-Loka is frantically patching together a seemingly seamless reality from a barrage of highly fragmented, rapidly changing inputs.
To highlight how much of our suffering in this realm is constructed by our own restless patching, the text drops in a quote from the ancient Greek Stoic philosopher Epictetus.
Oh, I love this one.
It's so good. It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them.
It's timeless.
If we apply that to modern daily life, it makes perfect sense for you listening. Imagine you receive a text message from your boss late on a Friday night that just says, "We need to talk first thing Monday."
Oh, instant panic.
Right, but the physical reality of that moment, the thing itself, is just a few black pixels emitting light on a glass screen. It is entirely neutral.
Completely harmless.
But your mind immediately weaves an elaborate catastrophic reality around those pixels. I'm getting fired. I ruined that project. My career is over.
And your opinion, your mental projection, is what causes the very real spike in cortisol.
The racing heart, the knot in your stomach. You are having a physical reaction to a phantom reality you just constructed.
The text actually maps out the microseconds of what is happening in your brain during that exact scenario.
Okay, let's get into that.
It introduces what it calls the micromechanics of thought, specifically breaking down the cognitive series. It argues that active cognition is not a continuous, unbroken stream of awareness, even though it feels completely fluid to us.
It feels like one long movie.
But it's not. It actually occurs in incredibly brief, rapid-fire episodes. And between these microscopic bursts of active perception, the mind falls into a passive, resting state.
The author refers to this resting state as the Bhavaṅga, or the life continuum.
The Bhavaṅga is a fascinating concept. You can think of it as the baseline frequency or the idle state of the mind when it is not actively grabbing onto an object.
Like a car idling at a red light.
Exactly. It is the underlying hum of the machinery that maintains the continuity of your personality between active thought.
And it says it's also the state your mind drops into during deep, dreamless sleep, right?
Yes, where there is no active subject-object division happening.
But we don't stay in dreamless sleep. We wake up, we look at our phones, and the active phase begins.
Here comes the friction.
The text introduces a term here that seems to be the linchpin of the entire system. Here's where it gets really interesting. The Javana stage.
The Javana stage is the pivot point of human freedom and bondage within this schematic.
That's a huge claim.
The text describes Javana as the active, impulsive phase of cognition. In a single cognitive series, which flashes by in a fraction of a second, the Javana phase typically lasts for 7 microscopic moments.
The 7 moments.
It is the precise fleeting window where volition is generated and where karma is formed.
Okay, I'm struggling a bit with the use of the word karma here because it carries so much pop culture baggage.
It really does.
Normally, if someone says karma, they mean a cosmic scorecard. Like, if I cut someone off in traffic, I get bad karma, and later I'll get a flat tire.
Is the text implying there's some universal judge keeping track of our Javana moments?
Not at all. The text strips karma of any supernatural or judicial elements. In this framework, karma is simply psychological momentum.
Psychological momentum?
Yes. It is the law of cause and effect applied to cognitive habits. Volition, your intentional, emotional reaction to a stimulus during those 7 Javana moments, literally carves a habit pattern into your mind.
So it's neurological almost.
Exactly. The text states that it is specifically in these Javana moments that we react to the world with greed, aversion, or delusion.
Let's apply that back to the text message from the boss.
Good idea.
You see the screen? That is raw sensory input. In a fraction of a millisecond, your mind identifies the words. Then you enter the Javana phase.
For those 7 tiny moments. Right, and for those 7 moments, you react with intense fear and aversion. I don't want to get fired. By repeatedly reacting with aversion, you aren't angering a cosmic judge.
No, you are literally carving a deeper neurological groove of anxiety into your own mind.
You are generating the psychological momentum that ensures you will react with even more anxiety next time. You are building the walls of the sensory realm yourself, moment by moment.
The author describes the sensory realm as being defined by this high-friction interaction between desire and object.
High friction.
We are constantly bouncing between grasping at things we want, violently pushing away things we don't want, or being utterly confused by our surroundings.
And every time we engage in that high-friction reaction during a Javana moment, we reinforce our entanglement in this specific plane of consciousness.
We are just spinning our wheels deeper into the mud.
When you lay it out like that, it sounds exhausting. Living in the sensory realm is like being trapped in a glitchy, highly reactive video stream where everything demands an immediate emotional response.
It's pure burnout.
Which makes the transition to the next layer of the schematic incredibly appealing.
Oh, definitely.
We move out of the noisy basement of the sensory realm and enter the second plane, the fine material realm, or Rupa-Loka.
The shift from Kāmā-Loka to Rupa-Loka represents a massive upgrade in the resolution, stability, and tranquility of consciousness.
So, if the sensory realm is a chaotic, deafening city street where your attention is constantly hijacked by sirens and flashing billboards,
The fine material realm is like stepping into an immaculately clean, perfectly silent, brilliantly lit laboratory.
I love that. The text compares the structure of this realm to the state of lucid dreaming or high-resolution imagination.
Yes.
And it points out something quite relatable for you as the listener. We actually access a crude, unstable version of this realm anytime we close our eyes and try to visualize something.
That's right.
If I ask you right now to close your eyes and vividly picture a bright blue apple, you are temporarily stepping out of the sensory stream and generating mental form.
You are interacting with the basic mechanics of the fine material realm.
But the operative word there is temporarily.
The text is very careful to note that ordinary human imagination is highly unstable.
Because when you try to hold the image of that blue apple, within a few seconds, the mind wavers.
You start thinking about what you have to do later today, or you notice a sound outside.
Or your knee starts to ache.
The gravity of the sensory realm reasserts itself, pulling you back down into the friction.
So how do you stay there?
To truly dwell in the fine material realm, the text states that a practitioner must cultivate samadhi.
Samadhi. I hear that word thrown around in yoga classes a lot, usually to mean some sort of ultimate blissed-out relaxation. Is that what this text means, or are we talking about a more specific mechanical process?
The text uses it in a highly technical sense. Samadhi here means deep, unwavering concentration. It is the unification of the mind.
Unification.
Yes, it requires training the attention to sustain itself on a single object without a microsecond of wavering.
To what kind of object?
In classical meditative practices, this object could be the sensation of the breath, or a visual disk of color, which the text refers to as a nimitta.
Nimitta, okay.
As this concentration deepens and the mind unifies around the nimitta, a profound mechanical shift occurs. Do you recall those impulsive Javana moments we just discussed in the sensory realm?
Yeah, the 7 microscopic moments where we normally react with greed or fear, carving out our karma.
Right. When the mind achieves deep samadhi and enters a state called jhana, which is the sustained, absorbed attention characteristic of the fine material realm, those Javana impulses no longer bounce around reacting to random stimuli.
Oh, they lock on.
They become fully and continuously absorbed in the single object of meditation.
So the text explains that the usual hindrances of sensory distraction, the craving, the restlessness, the doubt, they are temporarily suppressed by the sheer force of concentration.
The mind becomes perfectly still, luminous, and filled with a refined rapture.
I picture it like taking a magnifying glass on a sunny day.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
The scattered sunlight is the sensory realm. It warms everything up a bit, but it's diffuse and chaotic. But if you hold the magnifying glass perfectly still, you unify all those scattered rays into a single, intensely bright, burning point of light.
That laser focus is jhana.
In that state, you aren't battling your anxieties or your desire to check your phone. Those impulses are completely suppressed by the blinding power of your unified attention.
And this specific mechanism leads to one of the most fascinating diagnostic notes in the entire document. It fundamentally reinterprets the traditional religious concept of heaven.
Yes, this part is a massive paradigm shift. Right in the middle of this section on the fine material realm, there is a literal diagnostic note.
Capital letters and all.
It states, rebirth in the heavenly realms of radiant form corresponds to dying while the mind is in this stabilized genic state.
We really have to unpack the implications of that sentence. In many Orthodox traditions, heavenly realms are viewed as a reward. A divine judge reviews your moral scorecard, sees you were a good person, and grants you entry to a paradise of light and angels.
Right, the traditional view.
But this schematic views cosmology through the lens of pure cognitive physics.
Cognitive physics.
If a practitioner has trained their mind over years to stabilize in this luminous, highly unified state of jhana, and that happens to be the frequency their consciousness is tuned to at the moment of physical death,
the momentum of that mental state simply continues.
Exactly.
It has nothing to do with a bearded deity making a judgment call. It is just the law of momentum. If you throw a baseball, it continues on its trajectory until gravity or friction stops it.
Perfect analogy.
If your mind is stabilized in a state of luminous unified form at the moment of death, it simply continues projecting a reality of luminous unified form. It is the direct result of mental unification.
It completely replaces the anthropomorphic idea of heaven with the strict laws of psychological momentum.
It is a sobering thought, isn't it? Because the inverse is also true.
It is. The text implies that the mind is the architect of its own continuity.
So whatever chaotic, fear-driven habits you are cultivating in the sensory realm right now,
you are actively building the architecture of your future experience.
Wow. Okay, so if the fine material realm is a high-resolution, perfectly stable internal VR, where the mind is laser-focused on a beautiful form, what happens when we delete the form?
That's the next logical step.
If the mind is software rendering a blue apple, what happens if we wipe the apple from the code?
This brings us to the next stratum in the schematic.
The formless realms, or Loka. And I have to warn you listening, trying to visualize this next part is inherently paradoxical because the text asks us to let go of spatial geometry entirely.
This is where the text stretches our conceptual limits to the breaking point.
It really does.
It argues that beyond the perception of form, awareness can be directed toward the container of phenomena itself.
The container.
Yes. Meditators who have mastered the fine material states, who can hold that laser beam of focus perfectly still without effort, can choose to refine their perception even further.
How do they do that?
They do this by moving through a specific progression of cognitive abstractions.
So walk me through it.
First, they drop the visual form entirely and become aware only of infinite space. Then they realize that infinite space is being known by consciousness, so they turn their attention inward and focus purely on infinite consciousness itself.
Let's try to ground this with another analogy, because infinite consciousness sounds incredibly esoteric.
It does.
Imagine you are holding a clear glass of water. If you are operating in the sensory realm, your mind is bouncing all over the place. You are noticing the condensation on the outside, wondering if the water is cold, wishing it was iced tea instead, noticing a smudge on the rim. It is noisy.
Constant friction.
But if you move into the fine material realm, you unify your mind. You focus all your attention on a single, perfect reflection of light hitting one drop of water. You are entirely absorbed in that form.
And how would that translate to the formless realms?
Well, in the formless realms, you stop looking at the water entirely. You shift your focus to the glass itself, the container holding the form.
Right.
Then you let go of the glass, and you become aware of the empty space in the room that was allowing the glass to exist. You are progressively peeling away the contents of reality to observe the bare architecture of knowing.
That's brilliant. And the text outlines the progression clearly. The mind moves from infinite space to infinite consciousness to a state of profound nothingness. And finally, it refines itself so much that it reaches the very border of perception itself, a state of neither perception nor non-perception.
What is vital to grasp here is the author's insistence that these formless states are not geographical locations.
Right. If a practitioner achieves the state of infinite space, they have not psychically teleported their mind to the edge of the physical universe.
These are purely cognitive abstractions. They are deeply stabilized genic states where the mind has simply let go of all spatial coordinates and form-based imagery.
The text includes a warning about these states, noting that they can be deeply disorienting to the uninitiated.
And it makes sense. Imagine floating in a sensory deprivation tank in pitch blackness, but not just for your body, for your mind.
No up, no down, no left, no right.
There is no bodily sensation, no sound, no visual field. For a mind that is addicted to the chaotic friction of the sensory realm, that level of formlessness would induce panic.
Absolute terror.
But the text explains that for a highly trained mind, This is the absolute pinnacle of concentration. It is the most refined, peaceful state possible within the constructed cosmos.
However, this brings us to the great pivot of the entire text.
The ultimate twist.
The author reveals that even the peak of the formless realms, that state of nearly imperceptible awareness, is still part of the illusion.
Wait, really?
Yes, it is still saṃsāra. It is a highly refined, perfectly peaceful prison, but it is still a prison.
Because it is still a constructed reality.
Maintained by subtle volition and a microscopic thread of identification.
Which necessitates the final, ultimate paradigm shift.
The supramundane.
We have climbed the cognitive ladder from the noisy basement of the sensory realm up into the glowing, silent laboratory of the fine material realm and out into the vast conceptual emptiness of the formless realms.
We've covered the whole cosmos.
But now the schematic breaks its own rules. The final category is the supramundane, or Lokuttara, and the text makes it clear that the supramundane is not another realm at all.
It is fundamentally different from everything we have discussed. The author states explicitly, this final category does not represent a realm in space, but a fundamental paradigm shift.
Because in all the previous realms, whether you are worrying about an email, visualizing a blue apple, or floating in infinite space, the mind is still doing that one basic mechanical thing we defined at the very beginning.
Objectification.
Dividing experience into a perceived object and a perceiving subject. Even if you are in the formless realm focusing on nothingness, there is still a subtle sense of a me who is experiencing the nothingness.
There is still a division. But the text describes the supramundane consciousness as the precise moment where the entire process of objectification collapses. The engine of the illusion shuts down.
How does that even happen?
This occurs when nibbana, the unconditioned, becomes the object of consciousness.
But nibbana isn't a thing.
Exactly. Because nibbana has no conditions, no form, no location, and is not a constructed reality, it cannot be grasped.
Okay.
When the mind takes the unconditioned as its object, the grasping mechanism fails. The illusion of the self, the perceiving subject, ceases.
It sounds like a paradox. The mind tries to grab onto something that inherently isn't a thing, and in the process of trying to grasp the ungraspable, the grasping hand itself vanishes.
That's a poetic way to put it, but mechanically accurate. The text refers to these events as path and fruit moments, emphasizing that they are singular, incredibly brief cognitive events.
To understand the power of these path and fruit moments, we have to contrast them with the jhanas we discussed earlier.
Right, because in jhana, whether in the realms of form or formlessness, the hindrances and negative habits of the mind are only temporarily suppressed by concentration.
It is like holding an inflated beach ball underwater.
Yes.
As long as you exert the continuous effort of pushing down, the ball stays under. The surface of the water is calm, but the millisecond your concentration breaks, the ball violently pops right back up to the surface.
All the anger, the greed, the anxieties of the sensory realm weren't destroyed.
They were just sleeping beneath the surface of the concentration.
But supramundane consciousness operates on a different mechanic entirely. The text states that these path and fruit moments permanently sever mental chains, which it refers to technically as fetters.
Severing the chains.
Unlike temporary suppression, supramundane consciousness eradicates the root conditions of suffering at the base code level.
If we go back to our computer analogies, it is the difference between installing a quick software patch that temporarily hides a glitch while the program is running
versus wiping the hard drive completely and installing a brand new, bug-free operating system.
Yes. The text uses a very specific analogy here. It notes that the path and fruit moments are transient. The cognitive event itself flashes by in a fraction of a second, much like a Javana series.
A blip.
The mind experiences this profound cessation, the collapse of objectification, and then eventually it has to return to the Bhavaṅga, the resting state, and resume normal active cognition to interact with the physical world.
Because you still have to eat, talk, and walk.
Exactly.
But when the mind boots back up and returns to everyday reality, the operating system has been permanently altered.
The text is unambiguous about this. The capacity for certain delusions is gone.
Gone forever. If a specific fetter, for example, the deep-seated illusion of a permanent, independent self is severed during that path moment, that individual literally can no longer perceive reality through that diluted lens.
The neurological and psychological wiring that allowed for that specific type of suffering has been completely uninstalled. They can never view the world the same way again.
That shifts the whole paradigm of what enlightenment is supposed to be.
It means the goal isn't to float away to some magical dimension or live permanently in a trance.
It is about living right here in the physical world, but with an upgraded cognitive operating system that no longer compulsively generates its own suffering.
And that profound realization brings us to the final and most crucial section of our deep dive, the practical application.
Because the author anticipates the reader's question, why do I need to know all this?
Right. The text explicitly warns us that we are not exploring this structure to encourage travel between realms. This document is not a tourism brochure for the mind.
We are exploring the structure to demystify it.
Because the danger, according to the text, is that these realms are incredibly seductive.
They're just modalities of perception fueled by habit. But if you don't understand the mechanics, you will spend your entire life blindly reacting.
You will spend all your energy running away from the friction of the sensory realm and trying desperately to grasp the temporary peaceful highs of the fine material or formless realms.
The author issues a very specific warning here, aimed at what they call practitioners of Albedo.
If we look back at the illustration on the very first page, the globe is wrapped in alchemical symbols.
Right. Albedo is a classical alchemical term referring to the whitening or purification stage of a substance.
In a cognitive context, these are well-meaning practitioners who are actively trying to purify their minds and become better people.
But the text bluntly states that their aim should not be to polish the prison cell of the sensory realm.
Polishing the prison cell. That is a brutal critique of the modern self-improvement industry.
It really is.
It essentially means that trying to perfectly arrange your everyday, diluted life is futile. You think, if I just get a better job or optimize my morning routine or buy a nicer car, my sensory realm will finally be comfortable.
But you are just putting fresh paint on the bars of a cell that is still fundamentally built on high-friction reactions and anxiety.
And the text goes further, warning that the aim is also not to escape into the golden cage of the fine material realm.
Which is a direct critique of using meditation purely for stress relief or escapism.
Yeah.
If you use concentration techniques just to bliss out for an hour a day and ignore the reality of your life, you are locking yourself in a golden cage. It is beautiful, it is peaceful, but the moment you stop meditating,
the beach ball pops back up.
It is still a cage.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the actual goal according to this schematic? The text identifies it as vipassanā, insight.
I want to read the specific sentence the text uses here because it synthesizes everything we've talked about perfectly.
Go for it.
It says, we use enough tranquility to study the microscope, then we turn that lens upon the mind itself to understand and finally dismantle the machinery of becoming.
It is a brilliant summation. You utilize the concentration techniques of the fine material realm, the samadhi, the tranquility, not as a hiding place, but as a tool.
You use it to steady the microscope.
If your mind is frantically bouncing around in the sensory realm, reacting to every email and noise, you cannot observe your own cognitive mechanics clearly. It's too blurry.
Too much friction.
But once you achieve a baseline of stillness, you do not look at pretty internal visions or blue apples. You turn the lens inward, back onto the mind itself.
You observe those microscopic Javana moments.
You watch the process of objectification happening in real time.
You watch yourself putting the VR headset on over and over and over again, thousands of times a minute, until you finally understand how the wiring works and you figure out how to unplug the machine entirely.
You achieve that supramundane shift.
You dismantle the machinery of becoming. We have covered an immense, almost overwhelming amount of ground today.
A literal cosmology.
Let's trace the arc of the journey this text has taken us on. We started down in the noisy, high-friction grind of the sensory realm, where our minds are constantly patching together a cohesive reality from fragmented data.
Generating our own karma, our own mental momentum in those split-second Javana impulses.
We then explored how we can upgrade the resolution of our consciousness, moving into the lucid, stabilized states of the fine material and formless realms by steadying our attention and suppressing the hindrances.
But ultimately, we learned that the true goal isn't to inhabit any of those constructed realms.
The goal is to use that stabilized attention as a microscope, to gain insight, and to achieve a supramundane shift.
Collapsing the illusion of the self, entirely and permanently upgrading our cognitive operating system so it no longer generates suffering.
I think anyone who has followed this breakdown should feel a genuine sense of validation. It takes a significant amount of intellectual courage to look past the superficial layer of the perceived world and examine the actual engine of your own consciousness.
It is profoundly challenging to accept that the reality you experience is being constructed by your own reflexive habits. But as the text illustrates, understanding that construction is the ultimate key to freedom.
The fact that you are here unpacking this dense, ancient schematic with us shows you have that curiosity and courage. Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with an unscripted thought to ponder as you transition back into your day.
Something to build on everything we've covered.
Exactly, building directly on everything we've discussed, specifically those tiny micro moments of perception. We learned today that our entire reality, the physical objects around us, the people we interact with, the very concepts of space and time, is being continuously constructed, rendered, and identified with in those split-second Javana impulses of our minds.
The rapid, repetitive process of identification.
So here is my question for you. What would actually happen to the universe if you could somehow intentionally pause your mind just 1 millisecond before that Javana impulse hits?
1 millisecond.
If you could just freeze the frame right before your brain decides to react, label, and identify, does the world outside of you literally cease to exist in that moment, suspended in a state of raw, unrendered data until you allow yourself to perceive it again?
When perception ceases, the world dissolves.
Something to chew on during your commute. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the cosmos of the mind. Keep asking questions, keep looking under the hood of reality, and we will catch you on the next deep dive. Take care.